Good morning again. Today's talk is the second part in a three-part series on memories of great monks. In this case, Venerable Ananda Maitreya, who lived from 1896 to 1998. Just bring up his picture. It was my great good fortune to associate with the renowned Theravada Buddhist monk Venerable Ananda Maitreya in July 1986 for an intensive 3-day period. He came to our Santa Barbara Vedanta Center to participate in the Vedanta Society of Southern California's celebrations of Sri Ramakrishna's 150th birth anniversary. And on that weekend, an in-depth Catholic, Buddhist, and Hindu interfaith dialogue. And you can see to the extreme right, Revered Swami Swahanandaji. Next to him, Venerable Ananda Maitreya. And to the extreme left, we have Father Gregory Elmer from the Catholic tradition. Venerable Ananda Maitreya was a long-time friend of the Ramakrishna mission, especially in South India, and one of the most highly respected teachers of the Theravada tradition in the 20th century. At 91 years of age at that time, he was a master of both the Theravada and Mahayana schools of Buddhism. Venerable Ananda Maitreya was one of the few monastic scholars who actively participated in the 6th famous council in Burma in 1953, translating and correcting translations of Buddhist texts. He was reputed as an authority of Buddhism and presided for some time as the president of that council. He is both a seer and a scholar. Ananda Maitreya helped popularize Buddhism in the West because of his special ability to make the most advanced Buddhist teachings accessible to Buddhist students at any level and to non-practitioners alike. Thus, it was only natural that he was chosen by BBC's television series, The Long Search, to represent Buddhism in its 1977 episode, Footprint of the Buddha. And you can Google that. It's available on YouTube, so it might be of interest to you. As mentioned in the first talk in this series, Venerable Ananda Maitreya was inspired at an early age by Swami Vivekananda. He had over 1,000 pieces of literature relating to the Ramakrishna, Vedanta, and Hinduism in his own personal library. Furthermore, he studied Vedanta and practiced Raja Yoga for some time. And though there are some marked differences between Vedanta and Theravada Buddhist systems, such as Theravada concept of consciousness being only mental units rather than the underlying unified consciousness that we accept in Vedanta, and a concept of no self rather than the Atman. Venerable Ananda Maitreya's in-depth study of Vedanta revealed to him profound similarities, which we will further bring out in this and our last talk in this series, to the point where he recognized the negation techniques within Drisha Viveka, which is neti neti. This little I associated with my mind-body complex is impermanent, to match those techniques of the Vipassana meditation system. The only difference is that the Vipassana discipline does not affirm any positive conclusion. In other words, it doesn't recognize the outcome of that discipline to be neti neti atma, denying all false identifications, gross and subtle, with this mind-body complex to arrive at knowledge of the Atman. In other words, the rigorous and systematic Vedanta process of negating all impermanent and illusory features of this mind body complex known as Viveka, the Jnana Yoga path of discrimination, ultimately uncovers the supersensuous reality of the Atman. On the other hand, the Theravada Buddhist Vipassana practice of negation does not lead to the Atman because, first, from the Theravada Buddhist perspective, most people would misunderstand what the Atman is and mistake it for the shadow ego, says Venerable Ananda Maitreya. And second, Vipassana gives insight into the true nature of reality as shunyata, emptiness. However, when Swami Prabhavananda, a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, met D.T. Suzuki, the renowned Zen master, they both recognized, though they could not speak a common language, they both recognized and affirmed sunyata, the emptiness of Buddha, of Buddhism, is as Purna, the fullness of Brahman. And of course, Zen Buddhism comes the closest to Vedanta because of its acceptance of the Buddha nature. So in this three-part series, in the first reminiscence, Venerable Ananda Maitreya shared the similarities between Vedanta and Buddhism, the means to attaining the goal of liberation in this life, some of the forms of meditation taught in Theravada Buddhist tradition, Buddhist mindfulness practice, and spiritual experience. In today's reminiscence, Venerable Ananda Maitreya will share the stages of illumination, what the spiritual heart is, the higher self, both in Vedanta and Theravada Buddhism. So what are the stages of spiritual illumination in Theravada Buddhism? Venerable Ananda Maitreya explained, there are four. The first is Srota Apati, stream entry. Second, Akradagami, the once returners level. Third, Anagami, the non-returners level. And finally, the level of Arhatship, perfect sainthood. In the first stage, the vision of reality comes, which is called Sotapanna, entrance into the stream, to the real, the holy path. And what is that experience? Venerable Ananda Maitreya explained. On one side, the aspirant sees a world as impermanent, as illusion. On the other side, he sees the reality that is nirvana. For just a moment, the aspirant sees that, Ananda Maitreya explained. Then the vision disappears. Again, he comes back to normal consciousness. Still, the aspirant has some weakness, again and again, has to practice self-discrimination. Now here, for the sake of clarity, we may illustrate this experience with that of Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk who visited Gal Vihara in Sri Lanka on Monday, December 2nd, 1969, 8 days before his death. Gal Vihara, which is translated as the rock temple or stone monastery, is a Buddhist shrine in Polonnaruwa, Sri Lanka, constructed in the 12th century. On Thursday, December 5th, Merton entered in his Asian journal a description of his experience there in the presence of the great statues and his reflection on that experience. He wrote, the path dips down to Gal Vihara, a wide, quiet hollow surrounded with trees. A low outcrop of rock with a cave cut into it, and beside the cave, a big seated Buddha on the left, a reclining Buddha on the right, and Ananda, I guess, standing by the head of the reclining Buddha. In the cave, another seated Buddha. Merton continues, I am able to approach the Buddhas barefoot and undisturbed, my feet in wet grass, wet sand. Then the silence of the extraordinary faces, the great smiles, huge and yet subtle, filled with every possibility, questioning nothing, knowing everything, rejecting nothing. The peace not of emotional resignation, but of sunyata that has seen through every question without trying to discredit anyone or anything, without refutation, without establishing some other argument. Merton continues, I was knocked over with a rush of relief and thankfulness at the obvious clarity of the figures, the clarity and fluidity of shape and line, the design of the monumental bodies composed into the rock shape and landscape figure, rock and tree. Looking at these figures, I was suddenly, almost forcibly, jerked clean out of the habitual half-tide vision of things, and an inner clearness, clarity, as if exploding from the rocks themselves, became evident and obvious. The queer evidence of the reclining figure, the smile, the sad smile of Ananda standing with arms folded. The thing about all this is that there is no puzzle, no problem, and really no mystery. All problems are resolved and everything is clear simply because what matters is clear. Merton continues, the rock, all matter, all life is charged with Dharmakaya. Everything is emptiness and everything is compassion. I don't know when in my life I have ever had such a sense of beauty and spiritual validity running together in one aesthetic illumination. Surely, with my Asian pilgrimage has come clear and purified itself. I mean, I know and have seen what I have obscurely been looking for. I don't know what else remains, but I have now seen and have pierced through the surface and have got beyond the shadow and the disguise. Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued our discussion on the 4 levels. After some time, the Akratagami, the once returner, aspirant, develops his inner knowledge and inner vision. He comes to the same state a second time, but it is more developed and higher. With this vision of the Anagami, non-returner, some of his attachment to the world disappears. But still, he must come back. When he examines his experience, the aspirant understands that he is not yet perfect. Again, he practices discrimination. Then the 4th stage, arhatship. Herein he roots out anger and sensuality entirely disappears from him. The vision of nirvana becomes clearer than before. However, when he examines himself, he finds there is still some ego. So he must continue to practice discrimination. Now here, perhaps this first level of the 4th stage was best illustrated in the previous talk on Venerable Ananda Maitreya, when he described his use of pranayama as an abbot of a number of Sri Lankan monasteries in order to foresee problems arising in them, and thus his ability to intercede in time. But when a religious festival came and for several days he could not continue his practice of pranayama to feed his clairaudience and clairvoyance powers, Ananda Maitreya became frustrated and angry, thus realizing his pranayama practice had become an obstacle on his path, and thus he gave it up. Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued, At last, the aspirant comes to the full understanding. All his remaining weaknesses are rooted out. Now this light of nirvana is as perfect as daylight. In such a state, he sees perfectly the world as it is, as well as the opposite side. He becomes a jivan mukta, one who is free while living. In this connection, Swami Vivekananda describes that experience in the light of Vedanta. He wrote, "One day I was very thirsty and I wanted to have a drink at one of the lakes in the desert India. But when I approached that lake, it vanished. Immediately with a blow came into my brain that idea that this was a mirage. And then I remembered and smiled at my folly, that for the last month, all the beautiful landscapes and lakes I had been seeing were this mirage, but I could not distinguish them then. The next morning, I again began my march. There was the lake and the landscape, but with it immediately came the idea, this is a mirage. Once known, it has lost its power of illusion." Vivekananda continued, "So this illusion of the universe will break one day. The whole of this will vanish, melt away. This is realization. Philosophy is no joke or talk. It has to be realized. This idea that I am the body or mind will then vanish. Again, this world will come, men and women and animals will come, just as the mirage came the next day, but not with the same force. Along with it will come the idea that I know its nature now, and it will cause no bondage, no more pain, nor grief, nor misery. Whenever anything miserable will come, the mind will be able to say, I know you as a hallucination. When a man has reached that state, he is called Jivan Mukta, free even while living." I then asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya, will visions come to anyone who is sincerely one-pointed? His answer was in accord with what our own Vedanta teachers tell us. One should not have a desire for a vision, he said. When the mind is free from allurements and pure, one naturally gets the vision of the supramundane. He goes on, there are some, however, who are very good in character, but unless their mind is made mature by proper meditation, they are unable to rise up to the level where they should get the vision of the reality. In this connection, Swami Turiyananda was once asked, they say one gets the vision of light when the mind rises to the throat chakra. What kind of light is that? Yes, one sees light, the Swami answered, but then it is not any gross light. It is the light of knowledge. What is the special characteristic of that light of knowledge? Sri Krishna explained in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 69. The recollected mind is awake in the knowledge of the Atman, which is dark night to the ignorant. The ignorant are awake in their sense life, which they think is daylight. To the seer, it is darkness. Now we come to the heart, the spiritual heart. As a follow-up question, I asked, are such seers those who have opened the wisdom eye aware that their seat of consciousness is in the heart. Venerable Ananda Maitreya's answer was in accord with the Vedanta scriptures. Yes, he said, I think they are aware that their seat of consciousness is in the heart. He continued, in Hinduism, the heart is considered one of the most suitable seats of meditation for most aspirants. Venerable Ananda Maitreya added, according to the Buddhist tradition, the heart is the seat of the mind. From that basis, it seems that the heart is one of the most suitable seats of meditation. In this connection, it's important to note that in the Sankhya Yoga tradition, there are various functions of the mind called by different names. Chitta is the mind stuff, the lake of the mind that includes the vrittis, our thoughts, emotions, memories. It includes manas, ahankara, and buddhi. Manas is the component of the mind that receives sense impressions and presents them to the buddhi recording faculty. It is deliberation, as in, I see a person. Ahamkara is the ego sense, a component of the mind that claims sense impressions for itself as individual knowledge. The buddhi is also known as dhi. It is the discriminative faculty, the higher mind that watches the lower mind, as in mindful meditations. The buddhi is located in the spiritual heart. And in fact, in the Catholic tradition as well, the seers in that tradition say, place the mind in the heart. And so the buddhi is the part of the mind that is in the heart. And that is where, in the buddhi, spiritual experience takes place. Sri Ramakrishna said, whatever appears in pure mind is the voice of God. That which is pure mind is also pure buddhi. That again is pure Atman. To refine this topic even more, Swami Atmarupananda at one time explained, most Vedantins would say what the yogins would say, that the mind distorts the reflection of the Atman or Purusha. But from a higher standpoint, an Advaitin could say that the mind is a distorted reflection of the Atman. As Sri Ramakrishna says, the pure mind, the pure buddhi, and the pure Atman are the same. And then the mind becomes no mind, to borrow the expression of Zen Buddhism. That is when one realizes the self. There isn't a mind that is left behind while you identify with Brahman, waiting for you to return. No, the mind has merged into the Atman, which it actually is. It's just a distorted reflection of the self. Now, what is the self in Buddhism and Vedanta? I began by asking Venerable Ananda Maitreya. In Hinduism, there is the idea of the inner controller and also the witness consciousness. But in Buddhism, is the concept of the self sunyata or the non-self? Ananda Maitreya replied, sunyata is the last stage. In the beginning, it is the inner controller. In Theravada, we don't take sunyata as an inner controller. What we have to do is to realize the sunyata of the world. Sunyata means emptiness of any reality. Much like the mirage that Swami Vivekananda saw. Ananda Maitreya continued, who then is the inner controller? One's own mindful mind. Venerable Ananda Maitreya explained, the faculty of reasoning accompanied by mindfulness is our inner controller, But that perspective may confuse traditional Theravada Buddhists. Is that inner controller felt to the heart? I asked. Yes, he said. A person who has developed it feels it. That is the God within. So here, it's important to note that the word God is not used in the traditional Theravada tradition. But Venerable Ananda Maitreya's explanation show not only the depth of his realizations, but his breadth in having practiced certain Vedanta sadhanas to a fairly high level of attainment. What is the inner controller in Vedanta? We find the meaning in the Pravrajika Upanishad, chapter 3, section 7, verse 15. He who exists in all beings, who is their innermost core, whom all beings do not know, whose body are all beings, who, remaining within, controls all beings. This is your Atman, the Antaryami, the immortal. Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued with a caveat in traditional Theravada Buddhism. However, he said, for some persons, there come some obstacles. If they think that God is a person and they personify and imagine some form, in the beginning, it will be helpful. But if they retain the same attitude, they cannot develop along the Theravada path. The aspirant has to go beyond form, I prompted. He answered, yes, the form disappears. And in fact, in Vedanta, those practitioners who are meditating on a chosen ideal at a higher level, that form also disappears. Going back to our conversation, I asked, then does it become the inner controller? Yes, he said. Then finally the witness, I asked. Yes, he said. Then you see no God but yourself. I am that. A form or concept imagined is an inner controller, so long as the mind is fixed on it, he said. The real inner controller, from his own Theravada perspective, is the quality or faculty of reason which analyzes, criticizes, or discriminates, which is accompanied by mindfulness. The faculty of reason, which is developed into full wisdom, is the witness, he said. Here it's important to note that in Vedanta, the inner controller means the divine power of consciousness seated in the heart. It is a felt experience of a personal God. It may be formless, but the qualities of the personal God are present, which then ultimately dissolves into the witness consciousness, which is without any presence of the personal God. Ananda Maitreya continued, Buddha used Atman as a conventional truth, not as the ultimate truth. As everything we experience is subject to change, there can be no Atman in that experience of change. We Buddhists don't use the word Atman because ordinary people use this term to mean something limited, like the individual ego. Here, Theravada Buddhism departs philosophically from Vedanta. Yes, at the time of Buddha, the masses did not fully understand the meaning of the word Atman, but those properly schooled in Vedanta practice by qualified teachers would know otherwise. That is why Vivekananda accepted the moral force of Buddha's teachings, but did not accept a number of Theravada Buddhist interpretations of his philosophical teachings. For example, those that claim there is no proof of anything permanent and therefore deny the existence of an underlying reality. They claim that Buddha said there is no proof of anything permanent. It is all a mere mass of change, a mass of thought in a continuous change in what you call a mind. It's what you call a mind. This is Vivekananda speaking. Vivekananda challenged this. Is there an inner world? And what is it? It is the Atman. It is the self. It is the only thing an individual can be sure of. If he knows himself, he can know the universe and not otherwise. He continued. The same question was asked in the beginning of time, even in the Rig Veda, in another form. Who or what existed from the beginning? That question was gradually solved by the Vedanta philosophy. The Atman existed. That is to say, what we call the absolute, the universal soul, the self, with a capital S, is the force by which from the beginning all things have been and are and will be manifested. Now, to sidestep the Theravada Buddhist assumption that practitioners would not know the difference between Atman and ego, I persisted in my question. But the real self, the higher self, I asked. Venerable Ananda Maitreya responded, according to the Buddhist way of looking at things, when one says self, the word self limits its sense by itself. So long as we limit ourselves to the notion of self, we will not get out of this limited state. He continued, whenever we root out the attachment to limitation, we become free. This is not a state we can express or name by positive terms. We call it nirvana, a negative term which means freedom from binding. It is not nothingness, but it is beyond words. I asked, can it be called fullness? He answered, as a conventional term, we may call it fullness, but even the word fullness seems to be a relative term. Nirvana is to be experienced, but not to be expressed by any positive terms, for all such terms are coined to express the conditioned, whereas nirvana is unconditioned. Vedanta and Sri Ramakrishna would certainly agree that the absolute is beyond words. One day, Sri Ramakrishna wanted very much to share his spiritual experiences with his monastic disciples. He said, while coming down from Nirvikalpa Samadhi and still under its influence, Sri Ramakrishna would try to describe that state, but he was unsuccessful and would enter again into that state. Eventually, he would tearfully say, I wish very much to tell you about it, but I cannot. Somebody shuts my mouth. I asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya to try to express the unconditioned then is like a defilement. Yes, he said, by means of words, you cannot explain it. Always you have to refer to it with a negative expression, neti neti, not this, not that. Ananda Maitreya continued, however, even in Buddhism, you can find the term Atman for nirvana. One passage reads, monks live with the Atman for their refuge. But there the commentary says that the Atman means nirvana. He went on, sometimes even Buddha used the word atta, which is Pali for Atman, for nirvana. But at the same time, the commentary clarifies that he did not mean individuality or ego. The ego is limited. Atman is one with Brahman, I then stated. Yes, he replied. According to Vedanta terminology, we Buddhists recognize the word Brahma-Bhuta, which implies both the Buddhas and Arhats, those who have reached a state of perfection and enlightenment. Brahmayana, the highest vehicle or the way to the highest good, nirvana, also means the Noble Eightfold Path. In the Sutta Pitaka, we find both these words. From this, it seems that the Buddha and his disciples have used the word Brahman to express holiness or perfection. He went on. According to Dr. Grimm, a German Buddhist, and his followers, Brahman, Atman, and Nirvana mean the same thing. This is the point of controversy between Orthodox and unorthodox Buddhist scholars. Then Ananda Maitreya shared, I have not yet reached my own conclusion on this point. I asked, when a Buddhist rishi sees a person, what does he see? Ananda Maitreya replied, according to convention, I would say he sees a person. But from an absolute point of view, I would say he sees states. Like waves, I asked. Yes, he said. Then came the question. It must take a tremendous amount of self-control for a rishi to walk in a conventional way, doesn't it? Venerable Ananda Maitreya replied, even though one has realized the ultimate truth, it is not difficult for the wise to use convention without being deluded. Suppose a man works in his field as a farmer. If the same man owns a shop, in his shop he successfully works as a merchant. Here we're reminded of Arjuna's famous question in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 54. Krishna, how can one identify a man who is firmly established and absorbed in Brahman? In what manner does an illumined soul speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? Sri Krishna answers in verses 55 to 72. But in verses 64 and 65, he reveals the inner state of the mind of a seer. When he has no lust, no hatred, a man walks safely among the things of lust and hatred. To obey the Atman is his peaceful joy. Sorrow melts into that clear peace. His quiet mind is soon established in peace. Though Vedanta and Buddhism are similar in many respects, there are also some philosophical differences as regards the nature of consciousness and the end result, the viveka or vipassana, the path of negation. In Vedanta, it is the Atman. In Theravada Buddhism, sunyata, emptiness. These two traditions also view Buddha himself differently. To the Theravadins, he is a highly evolved soul. To the Vedantin, he is an avatar. But both schools would agree the ultimate reality is beyond words, and the goal of life is to attain that ultimate truth, which is inexpressible. Furthermore, both systems have highly advanced philosophies that have been debated through the centuries, and great seers through the ages up to the present have emerged from both of these philosophies and practices. In our next and last presentation in this Buddhist series, we'll share Venerable Ananda Maitreya's Theravada perspective on reincarnation. What are the necessary qualifications in spiritual life? What are the obstacles in spiritual life? How to spiritualize our everyday life? And he will also share certain helpful helpful mindfulness techniques. And in this way, we share in the illuminating holy company of this highly evolved and exceptionally broad-minded Buddhist monk.